Yep, we're live.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tim Wiles, I'm the library director. Hi, Colleen. Thank you all for coming tonight. We are delighted with this turnout and delighted that you could join us. At least half of you are special guests that I want to introduce, so that's kind of fun. So on our panel, we have Town Supervisor Peter Barber, and we have Manny Solorio, Manny in the center, and Matt Seymour, engineers from CHA Consulting, which is the engineering firm that the town selected to work on the sidewalks project. I also want to introduce in the audience Ken Kowalczyk, the new Guilderland town planner, right over here. And right, applause. And the next 8 names are also worthy of applause, but let's hold it till the end. Sitting right next to Ken is Ann Wempel-Person, the Guilderland town historian, who is also the outreach librarian here at the library. So thanks for coming, Ann. We also have, I think, 3 library board members. Barry Nelson in the back, Noreen Rivas, where to go, Noreen? Okay. And Mark Antonio, Mike right here. Seated next to Mike is the director of the YMCA, Matt Scara. So thank you, Matt. And then we also have our town clerk, Jean Cataldo, and town board member, Pat Slavic, and Rosemary Senti, who just snuck in before I wrote your name, but you're also a town board member. And the rest of you are all special too. So thank you very much. So what we're going to do is Peter is going to begin with a quick summary of the 3 projects that he wants to talk about tonight, and then turn it over to Manny and Matt to talk specifically about the sidewalk project. And then when we get to that point, we'll do open Q&A. I am using a microphone because we recently got a comment card that said that even though the acoustics are great in this room, many people feel that they need amplification in order to hear. So if you have a question, I'll walk around with the microphone and hand it to you so that you can ask your question at that point. So Peter, you want to take it away?
Sure. Again, welcome. And I'm going to talk about just a few of the projects. The first one is actually about Mercy Care Lane, which is the road that you enter into the library on. Mercy Care Lane then continues down to Winding Brook. Mercy Care Lane, up until about a month or so ago, was a private lane. So basically the town had no responsibility for it, couldn't do anything with it, couldn't plow it, couldn't put any signage up, could do nothing with it. It was private property. I think it was in December, right around Christmas time, that road, which had been open for use, was blocked off because there had been some sort of property damage to a car that hit one of the potholes on that road close to Winding Brook. That caused a lot of consternation. I think Tim and I had a lot of commiserating about what to do and what not to do. But in the end, we reached out to the owners of that property, which was the First Columbian. And we came up with an understanding that we would look at that road to determine whether the town could take it over as a town road and then reopen it. Now that takes a little bit of time because I have to get my highway guys in there to look under the road at various times, do some coring, look at the stormwater, make sure we're not really, quote, buying into a problem because roads can be very, very expensive. And typically we get roads dedicated to us that are complete, built to town standards, paved, stormwater, everything's perfect. All we have to do is plow and occasionally, maintain it. So this was different. It was different primarily because it's so important to the library and its patrons. We just wanted to make sure that we had safe access so that cars primarily taking a left onto Western Avenue could do so at a traffic light. So the bottom line is we did take title after looking at it. The highway department recently milled the road. I think they did it on Friday. They should be paving it either Wednesday or Friday, sometime this week. And once that's done, it'll take another day for it to cure. And the plan would then be to reopen that road. So that will be quite an event. I also received an application on Mercy Care Lane for the dedication of the remainder of the road. Again, that's the part that goes from Route 20 up to the barricade past the library. That's owned by St. Peter's Health Partners. They are sort of interested in this idea of dedication to the town. Once again, we're going through the process of looking at the under drains and whatnot. I should also add that when our highway guys are going to be paving the latter part of Mercy Care Lane, they're also going to deal with the potholes near the entrance on Route 20. Even though it's private property, we've gotten the permission to do that. Yes, Barry, we're doing it just for you. So that's really for the Mercy Care Lane. I just want everybody to know also too that the town received on Friday, a lot of things happened on Thursday and Friday this week. We received an application for what's called the Winding Brook Commons Planned Unit Development. That is where the Glassworks Village site had been proposed. It's basically Winding Brook to the east, heading towards Hamilton Square. Again, the project application just came in. I see Ken Kabalchik there. He's our town planner. He'll be the first person to give some sort of review of that application. It basically is a mixed commercial and residential. There's about 80,000, 85,000 or so square feet of commercial space spread over 4 buildings. And I think there was, my count was 283 townhouses, 2-story structures with garages on the balance of the property. But again, it just started. Whether it's ever going to be approved and how it's going to look at the end is going to be through a very open and public process. So that's it. So the third item, the reason why we're here tonight is to talk about the Western Avenue sidewalk again. Just briefly, that's a sidewalk that's going to go from Devonshire Drive up to Mercy Care Lane. It's roughly a $680,000 grant that the town received. It has a 20% town match, which we would do it with our highway guys again. They're very nice to have highway guys, particularly highway guys who can pave now. So it's really saving the town, a lot of money. Again, for the same reason that we did for Mercy Care Lane, we did it again primarily for public safety. You can see people walking there. You see mothers in strollers, people in wheelchairs. So something that absolutely needs to take place. So again, without spending more time, I'd like to get to that sidewalk project, and I hand over to Manny.
Thank you, Peter. That was a good summary. Any questions? All right. Well, thanks. This is a great crowd. I'm glad we got a good turnout tonight. I'm Manny Slorio. I'm a project manager with CHA Consulting, and I'm joined by Matt Seymour, who is our project engineer, our lead project engineer. And Matt's leading the team that's working on the design of this project. And what I want to do tonight is give an overview of the project, tell you, some of the particulars about what's going to go on with this project, talk a little bit about the scope, the funding. You heard Peter touch on some of it. I want to give you guys a little more detail, what to expect, the process that we're going through, so you guys know. And then what we'll do is take some questions afterwards. Generally, I like to, if it's a project like this that, maybe you're a property owner that, you have a very specific question about your property on the project. If it's very specific to your property, let's talk about that later one-on-one so I can give you full attention. General questions at this point. So without further ado, I'll give a brief overview of the project and we'll get going. Can everybody hear me in the back, first of all? Usually somebody says no. Right? And then, can everybody see the board? Generally, I know it's relatively small. But just to give you a point of reference, hopefully everybody got a chance to see it. If not, we'll be available afterwards so that you can take a look at it. Point of reference, this is the library right here where we are. This is Western Ave, Route 20, and it picks up again down here. And this is where the CEFCU is. And so, that's towards Albany. Up is generally north. And what we're planning is that we're going to take the sidewalk that's in front of the library right now, and we're going to extend it down along that same side of the road all the way down to where that existing sidewalk in front of the SEFCU is. And, you know, as Peter mentioned, it's a safety concern. It's also a mobility concern. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, within the town, we want to have a safe mode of travel for all modes. Complete streets is not only a law within New York, but it's the way we like to look at our streets. That's providing modes of transportation for everybody: vehicles, transit, pedestrians, bicyclists. So one of the things one of the modes that's obviously missing here is safe pedestrian modes of transportation. So, also as Peter mentioned, this is a federal aid project, and I'll get into some of the things that we'll be up against with federal aid as well, and how that could affect the schedule, and how that affects some of the steps that we have to go through. So as I mentioned, the project's going to start in the area of the library where the sidewalk is. We're going to start constructing a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk. What that allows us to do is it allows us to provide a safe two-way passage for pedestrians along the southern side of Western Turnpike. You may ask why there isn't a second sidewalk on the other side of the road. Part of what we do when we look at the needs for sidewalks is we look at what's called pedestrian generators. And, you know, a lot of times those are schools, libraries, businesses, neighborhoods, and that leads you into what number of sidewalks you need. In this case, the most of the pedestrian generators are on this side of the road, so that's where we need the sidewalk. There's adequate crossing at the school. If you can think about it, at Winding Brook, there is a signal there with pedestrian crossing signals. So a sidewalk along this side of the road will provide an adequate and safe connection to that generator on that side of the road. Generally, the sidewalk, if you can picture the sidewalk that's in front of the library right now, it's maybe about a couple feet off of the roadway, right? There's a curb, a couple feet, and then there's a sidewalk. We're going to match into that, but then as we approach Winding Brook, we're going to taper the sidewalk back. We're not going to put in a new curb, because right now, Route 20 is not curved through here. We're going to maintain that, and we're going to offset to create a grass buffer space between the roadway and the sidewalk. And you can, if you can envision past the Hannaford, where the town offices are, there's a sidewalk on this side of the road that's very similar. There's a grass buffer, and then there's a sidewalk, and so that provides a buffer space for pedestrians to separate them physically from the vehicles on the roadway. So we're going to create about a 10 or 15 foot offset grass buffer space between the existing roadway and the sidewalk, and we'll continue the sidewalk down along the side of the road until we get near the area of Devonshire Drive near the SEFCU. At that point, we'll start to taper the sidewalk back in so that we can get a better crossing at Devonshire and minimize our impacts in that area as well. Some of the features to this project, you know, as I mentioned, we will be providing a continuous pedestrian facility between the existing facilities here near the library and down at SEFCU. We will be meeting all accessibility standards for ADA, or what's commonly now called PROWAG. That's for, you know, folks with disabilities, for their accessibility. It'll meet all the standards required there. We're going to take a look at the crossings at Winding Brook to make sure that those ramps meet ADA or PROWAG standards. At this point, we are not going to improve the signal or the pedestrian signals at Winding Brook, but it's something that we will consider. We'll take a look, we'll assess them, we'll make sure that they meet standards. We're not proposing any new signals as part of this project. And we will have an improved crossing down here at Devonshire. You can picture that's where it's the bus stop, or
Yeah, right by the
old bus stop building is right here. As we cross that Devonshire Drive, we'll improve the pavement markings and signage to make it a little more visible to motorists. Another area that we're interested in is across from the cemetery, there is a mound. If you never noticed it, I'm trying to give you some reference point. It's probably about halfway between the Winding Brook and the Sefcu. But if you look as you're heading towards Albany, the topography does mound up quite a bit through there. So we are looking to cut that back to make room for the sidewalk. And we're evaluating that right now to see what some of our options are through there. So that's a general overview of the proposed sidewalk, and let's talk about the schedule on this. Right now, we're proposing that this go out to construction next spring. That's spring of 2019. You're probably thinking, oh, you said you had the grant, right? Start building it. The thing is that this is federal transportation money, and it's not like a traditional grant where you get the money and you can just start going. It's more of a reimbursement. So, as Peter mentioned, 80% of the project is funded with these federal transportation funds. We have to follow certain federal processes that are in line with not only the state environmental regulations, but also the federal regulations as well. As the town works on this project, they get reimbursed by the federal government. If we work too far ahead out of the phase we're supposed to be in, we could jeopardize that federal funding. So I would love to get this thing on the street next week and start building it. But where we are, to try to simplify the federal process, you can really kind of break it down into three basic phases. There's the environmental studies is your first phase, your contract documents, final design could be your second phase, and construction your third. Now I'm oversimplifying it. There's several more steps within that process. But right now we're in the environmental studies phase. So what we have to do is we have to look at alternatives like this. We have to take a look at what the impacts could be from a state standpoint, SEEKR, you've heard of SEEKR, but also from a federal standpoint, NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. So we have to satisfy those environmental studies. We have to reach out to the public. We have to get public buy-in. We have to evaluate public input, and then we have to document it all. That document has to go not only through the state, the DOT, but also to the FHWA. Once they approve that we have satisfied all of our environmental studies, at that point we can start doing the final design of the project, meaning we can generate contract documents that can go out to bid. We start working ahead, we jeopardize our funding. So we're a little tied with how far ahead we can work. That final design phase, we will produce typically contract drawings, contract documents that will go out for a contractor bid. Before we get to even that point, once again, we have to have state and federal reviews to make sure that we got the okay to put this out to advertisement for a contractor. Once the contractor, it goes through an open bidding process, we take a look at the low bidder, we still can't award it. We have to go through an evaluation of those bids, go through the federal approval, and then we can award it. So there's all kinds of steps along the way that we have to go through. That's why, as much as I'd love to get this thing built this year, it's probably going to push us into the winter, and you can't build in the winter, so it's going to be a spring construction, is what we're anticipating. Now another twist is if we have to get easements, if we're outside the highway boundary, if there's some drainage that we may want to look at or improve outside of the right-of-way, we can't just get an easement. We have to go through a federal process for that as well. And that all falls into place along the process as well. So there's a lot of things that are a little bit beyond our control. We know the process, we know how to work through it, but even to complicate it more, this is US Route 20, which is a DOT road. So DOT has to be involved with the technical review of our designs as well. So there's multiple levels of review and oversight that we have to go through with this project. The good news, like I said, is that we're very familiar with the process. We know how to navigate the process. We know how to avoid missteps that would jeopardize some of the funding or some of the schedule. But at the same time too, there may be some things that are a little bit out of our control. So if you've never had to deal with a federal transportation project, sometimes it can get a little frustrating because you're wondering, when are they gonna build this thing? But believe me, we're working fast and furiously on this, so. So that's what's ahead of us with the project. I talked about some of the particulars. I talked about the schedule, where we are. Like I said, we're in the environmental studies phase, if you want to call it that. We've done environmental screenings. You may have seen some people walking out there with hard hats and vests on. In a lot of cases, they were some of our surveyors. In some cases, they were our environmental scientists doing environmental screenings. So we've got all that information, and we're anticipating that we will get through this environmental stage probably within the next month or so. And after that point, we'll do the final design phase. We'll get contract plans generated so this can go out to bid, and we can get a contractor on board. I was asked before about how long we thought it would take to construct. Once it is constructed, it's about a half a mile of sidewalk. There's not a lot of, the one thing that'll slow down a contractor when they're building sidewalks, if you have a lot of intersections with a lot of ramps, a lot of driveways with those tie-ins. But really, there's limited number of driveway tie-ins, there's limited number of ramps. So my guess is that this would be about 8 weeks of hard construction.
Excellent.
You know, there may be some mobilizing up to that point, and then after that, there may be some what we call punch list, a little cleanup work. But the heavy duty, I wouldn't anticipate being more than a couple months. At this point, I think I covered everything. I know Matt's available up here, but we'll take questions, general questions, and Kim, you want to do the?
Yep. Who has a question? Here we go.
Manny, that was my question about the time.
That's right.
But we're not going to count that as my question, though, right?
Oh, no, that was your one. Forget it.
What I was wondering about, Manny, do you have a project that you've worked on in the past that is similar to this that you might share with us, so you get a sense of what it would look like? Is there one that you've worked on that's maybe similar to this?
Boy,
that
this
you
one
could
here.
visualize?
I'll tell you the last one that was constructed, there's two of them that were constructed this year that I was in charge of. One was Delaware Avenue in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And Ken was involved with that one as well. That's obviously more complicated, more complex than this one. And I also was in charge of the Erie Boulevard project in Schenectady that was built this year. And obviously that one is more urban in nature.
Wow.
The best thing I can say is you know, like I said, if you go across from Town Hall and even a little farther, you'll notice that the sidewalks along that stretch are, you know, about 5 to 10 feet off of the roadway. So you have the roadway, you have a nice grassed area, and then you've got the sidewalk. Those are a little more visually pleasurable than looking at this one. You know, this one's going to be fairly straight down the road.
Yeah.
But I think that's the best way to gauge it is take a look up through there and see how that looks. That's pretty much what this is going to look like.
So you're the guy who did Delaware Avenue? Thank you.
I didn't know.
No,
Thank you was going
no, thank you. No, that is just like,
Now, will
Night
our
and day.
enthusiastic campaigners outside the library be affected? Will they be a little safer when they're out there with their placards and right outside the library?
Yes, as an engineer, I draw no political lines. I just am concerned with everybody's public safety.
Thank you so much.
Very reassuring. Thank you. When I was introducing elected officials, I forgot to introduce my friend Mark Grimm of the Albany County Legislature. Did you also have a question?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thanks, Ken. Do you have to negotiate with the property owners along the way in order to cut the sidewalk through?
You're saying if there's an easement that's required?
Yeah, in other words, obviously it's property along that road. I'm sure the property owners are wondering what's the circumstance.
Yeah, if there's an easement that's required, then once again, it goes under the federal process for acquiring property, or in this case, an easement. And there's what's called an incidental phase, and then there's an acquisition phase. And so the first step would be to meet with the property owner. This is that incidental phase. You meet with the property owner, you talk about what the project is, specifically one-on-one at that location. And this is a real estate person, professional. And you start talking about, with that property owner, you know, what's the use of that property? Getting as much information as possible about the value of that property. You know, even if it's just a small easement, you know, because we're encroaching, or if it's a drainage easement. And so gathering that information is that first step, and then you go through a full appraisal of that, you know, fair market value, and then you go to that property owner with that appraised value, and then that would be what I guess we'll call the negotiation phase. That's the acquisition phase in that federal process.
Can an owner say, I don't want a sidewalk? Are they able to say that, or do you have eminent domain powers, or what happens is one person, I don't want a sidewalk there, stay away?
The first thing we would do is we would try to determine, can we avoid this impact? Because it's an impact. If somebody is affected by this, like, I do not want this on my property, you're encroaching on my property, I do not want this. That's an impact. We have to look at, can we mitigate that? Can we minimize it? Can we avoid it? That's gonna be our first step, is to see if we can reduce that impact or avoid it. If we can't do it, if we've determined that, you know, the public good requires this, which is basically the definition of eminent domain, a simplified version of eminent domain, what we'd have to do is go through a condemnation process. And so we don't have the eminent domain powers, but it's a condemnation process. At that point, that's where it would go into a sort of the legal realm for everybody to determine, you know, is this fair, is this just, and is this person being compensated fairly? So, yeah, if it gets to that point on any transportation project, that's the process that has to go. Whether it's a new lane that you're putting through the front of the house, or if it's even just, you know, I got to extend the pipe and you know, change the drainage outlet.
Is there any chance to have a bike path along with the sidewalk, or is it the federal grant so restricted? Because it seems to me that would be the opportunity when you're putting a sidewalk in, maybe also to have a bike path.
Yeah, I know there's a couple things. I don't think we necessarily prevented ourselves from doing a bike path when we did the paperwork for the funding. But at the same time too, there are other mechanisms for tying in paths that are, I'm going to say are in the works. I will say that we are coordinating closely with the town on what is going on right now in this area, as far as some of these planned developments and some, you know, possible connections. Could we put a path in there? The thing we'd have to do is we'd have to widen this out to 10 feet rather than 5 feet, which would be a path. Not the end of the world, but we'd also have to determine, is there definitely a need for it along this corridor as well? And so at this point, what we've determined is that the best fit for this corridor and the anticipated planned development within the area is the sidewalk.
Peter, can I ask you a question also on the road? The library and the Y are two of the busiest places in town, and they're right next to each other. Is there any way to match that new road so that it's even with the Y, to facilitate the ability anyway to be able to go between the library and the Y?
Can I steal your microphone? The short answer is we're just taking over the existing Mercy Care Lane. If we want to relocate it to line up from the YMCA, which there has been some discussion about, it would require basically the cooperation of a property owner who just at this point has other ideas potentially down the road. You know, so again, we'll look into it. It's always best to align these roads if we can, but that would take some time. And we have an immediate concern, an immediate safety issue, and I think we're going to deal with what we have right now. I should also add, too, that the Highway Department has already gone through, cut back a lot of the foliage and a lot of the landscaping that made looking to your left, turning out of Mercy Care onto Windingbrook, somewhat difficult. So that's all been cut back, and the town will, you know, continue to maintain that going forward.
Does that mean that the line of sight has increased significantly at that point?
Yes, it has. Well, let's put it this way. That's what the Highway Department is reporting. I haven't tried it myself yet, but I understand the difficulty, particularly, again, as Mark was indicating, you're looking left, you're looking right, you're looking diagonally. It is not the best situation, but it's a situation we're dealing with right now in terms of what we can do and how we can get the road open as quickly as possible.
was a tremendous sized pothole, 2-3 feet deep. I don't know exactly how deep. And I noticed that all that's been done so far is they've pushed some loose macadam into the hole. I don't think that's gonna solve that particular problem. I think you should be putting in gravel or something like that, something more substantive.
Okay, well, I can't, I'm not a highway engineer or don't work for the highway department, but it's my understanding is that last stretch of maybe 30 or 40 feet of Mercy Care Lane was by far the most problematic. And that's also where they're giving the most attention. So my guess would be that before the paving takes place, they're gonna go in and take a look at the stormwater. My understanding is the problem there is that the stormwater infrastructure failed.
Oh,
You know, so I think that that was part of, they're gonna be working on the drainage there to get that back in shape. Now, one thing too, to make this clear, is that it's not gonna be brought up to what's called town highway standards. It's not gonna be a complete rebuild of this road. It's bringing the road back to a usable shape and dealing with the stormwater to the maximum extent possible. At some point, those properties very well will be developed, you know, by First Columbia, who else owns those properties. And it's at that time we'd expect the road to be brought up to full town standards.
Okay.
Questions?
It was a good answer for a guy that's not a highway engineer. A pothole is a drainage issue, and it takes a big repair effort. And nobody wants to just throw a cold patch in, but a lot of times that's a short-term solution just to get us to that point where we can have that repair, like Peter was saying.
First of all, thank you very much for taking this work on, because as the town grows up, sidewalks are really important. I had a couple of things. We were talking about the highway department. I've lived here for over 30 years now, and these people are, as local highway departments, go at the top of their game. I mean, it's really good that we can do this in-house, not have to contract it out, so I'm happy to know they're on the case. You mentioned, Supervisor, that they've applied to do some stuff with the Glass Village. The Hunger Kill is legally a trout stream, and I was wondering if somebody in the review process could look at that and see if we could have some habitat enhancement and public access, because when OPEC and Putin put gas up to $10, it would be nice to fish in Gilderland. So that's thing number one. I got two other things. Thank you for staying after the site distance on Winding Brook, because it's horrible, and you know, just mow baby mow there. Okay, and then this is the one where somebody's probably going to stone me afterwards. I have friends who bicycle from Towasentha in the western part of town to the eastern part of town, and they say that this segment in here is one of the worst parts on Route 20 for bicycling. And I used to work on Wolf Road, which is a really good road. You know, there's a nice shoulder and good sidewalks, a lot different than this. And there is always some idiot on a bicycle on a sidewalk. And I would rather, as a town taxpayer, spend some more money now to widen this so that we do something with getting, you know, being able to deal with bicycles than to have to pay a lawsuit because somebody hits a person with a stroller. So I just would like to ask that, you know, some kind of stuff be done, because the good bicyclists are going to be nervous to be on Western Avenue. The not so good bicyclists are going to be like, oh boy, here's a free lane to ride. So anything that you can do would be wonderful. And the last thing I wanted to ask was, you quite rightly brought up that Mercy Care is a private road, but can't we do something about negligent private road owners? Can't the building department issue them a ticket or something? Because it's a big part of things. So thank you for listening to me, and here's the microphone.
Okay, I'll try to address at least some of these. No, the highway department nor the police can do any ticketing on private roads. Private roads are, by their very nature, for the people who reside on those roads, and they can maintain them or not maintain them. You know, Mercy Care is a little bit different, obviously, because people I said maybe years ago when I went to one of these board of trustees meetings at the library that technically people have been trespassing over that road for all these years. Permissive trespassing and whatnot. People were dodging potholes and issues and whatnot. And no matter how many times we requested, I'm sure the library requested, the Y requested, it's just deaf ears. They're not going to put any money into it. In fact, I think they probably think, you know, we're letting you use it as is. We're not going to spend any money. So on the fishing options, I agree with you. Clearly, any impacts on the Hunger Kill are going to be assessed. But more importantly, I mean, the town is taking a lot of efforts to increase access, whether it be working with DEC to put some boat launches onto the Normansville. We're trying to get some shoreline fishing at the Waterfleet Reservoir. The other day, actually today, somebody showed me some picture of a bass that somebody caught at the pond at DiCaprio Park. So our goal, we're working very closely with a guy named Dennis Wishman, who is the public access coordinator for DEC to really promote public access for fishing at various sites. One of the problems we're finding is that we only can do it on town property. We're trying to secure some easements for, you know, where locations, you know, are you know, again, better. About the your question about the bicycle paths and whatnot, you know, again, we're dealing with a particular program here, which is really dealing with sidewalks. Trying to get funding for that falls at the same time for bicycle paths and sidewalks is, you know, it's a roll of the dice. It just doesn't happen. All I can say is that we have a number of projects, whether it's the Winding Brook Commons project, the former Glassworks site. There's also a proposal at the Hiawatha Trails where there's open space. If those projects ultimately advance, we would almost certainly be putting in both bicycle and pedestrian connections, basically running from the middle school over to the library and keeping people as much as possible for Route 20. I know that's probably more for recreational biking. There is some destinations, but in terms of commuting biking, Route 20 is just a very, very difficult environment. We did work with DOT to widen from the city line up until the northway Route 20 to allow for 5-foot wide bike lanes marked and whatnot. So at least there's some improvement. DOT will probably do some paving for the next stretch. We'll continue to try to advocate for that, but you know, getting out this far can take some time, but we're certainly trying to do the best we can.
I guess the question, and I understand about funding, and I thought you did a great job explaining the federal process. If we can't do this and widen it, what can we do to make sure that people behave themselves on that segment? Because if you're a bicyclist, it is going to be such a temptation to want to get on that sidewalk and stuff.
Well, my guess is, I'm not again a police officer, I'm not an engineer, but my guess is that you know, the police see it, they will ticket people, or certainly will warn people not to be riding on the sidewalk. It's not loud.
Next question? Okay, here we come.
I was just wondering what the cost of this proposed project is.
We have 680 programmed for it. We started looking at, we're at the point now where, you know, once you start getting some of the designs hashed out here, we can start looking at, you know, exactly what the costs are gonna be, and start looking at, you know, whether or not we're within that ballpark. But that's the overall cost.
I'm amazed that it would be so low. I would think it costs many millions of dollars to do a project like that.
I will tell you, if we put in curbs, you know, a lot of times you'll hear that, why didn't you put curbs in? You know, like that would dress things up a little bit. If you see a curb along a roadway, that captures drainage.
Yeah.
And what you have to do is you have to put in an entire closed drainage system. So you're probably thinking, yeah, you've probably seen some comparable projects that included the curb and then subsequent closed drainage and then the impact to the roadway because you're digging up the road to put in the closed drainage system. So yeah, it's not uncommon for a project like this to get over $1 million. But what we're doing is we're looking at the nature of, you know, the area, It's not conducive to a closed drainage system and a curved section. And we're providing instead a nice wide buffer, a 10 to 15 foot grass buffer instead. So, you know, looking at the cost implications of those two alternatives, you know, that's how we're able to keep the cost this low. Good question.
Next question?
There's always one. The trees. The buffer's gonna be 15 feet. Are we talking about losing a lot of trees? Is it gonna change the look on the way to Sefkill?
I'm a highway engineer. Trees are hazards. There's always one on the other end, right? Look, we have to try to minimize our impact to the environment. Like I said, one thing we have to consider is roadway safety. You know, and right now there's an adequate clear zone out here generally, but trees are fixed hazards, and you know it takes, you know, you just have to look at a newspaper. There's constantly problems with vehicles running off the road where you wouldn't expect it. So right now the trees out there are pretty much cleared out for DOT's purposes. And what we're going to look at is when we go in and start putting in the sidewalk, we'll have to consider, are there trees that we can save? We always look at that. Are there trees we can save? Because trees are an environmental impact if you start cutting them down. And not just the trees themselves, but there are species that are affected by that. So naturally we'll try to retain whatever we can. We'll try to minimize our environmental impacts. It's not uncommon either for a project like this where if we are impacting quite a few of those areas, trees or wetlands or things of that nature, that's part of this environmental study where we have to look at, can we refine this a little bit more so that we can get things to blend a little better. But certainly, that it is a consideration, even though they're hazards to me. But we do try to balance things out, certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Edwin? Going once. John?
Just to go back to the tree issue, there's a saying about right plant, right time, right place, right treatment. If you've got to take trees, can you mitigate by putting more in as replacement plantings?
Yeah, we certainly can. That's not uncommon for us to do. And if that is the case, if we do that, then what we try to do is not force something in. We have landscape architects on our staff, and they will look at getting replacement trees that are going to work. The worst thing you can do is start putting in species that aren't going to work, that are planted too close, and that are just going to cause problems. So yeah, that's certainly a consideration. That's certainly an option to mitigate removing trees. And if we do go that route, we would certainly ensure that it's a species that works.
You've got a good landscape architecture and environmental unit in your company too. That's some people that are very
They are good, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, but I agree. Yes, they are good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mark.
Is everybody else going? Manny, during construction, what will be the impact on traffic on Route 20?
No impact at all. I always tell people, any type of highway project, it's like,
Sure, that comes up every now and then.
yeah, every once in a while. I always say it's like getting a tooth drilled. There's going to be some discomfort, but afterwards, it's going to be all better. It's going to be fixed. Oh, look, the one thing that this project has going for it, as far as traffic impacts for construction, is that this construction is well off the road. And you really think about what it's going to take to build a sidewalk. And, you'd like to think it's people with small machines and stuff, but really, it's going to be excavators, it's going to be concrete trucks. It's going to be basically a shoulder closure, probably. We'll probably have to close the shoulder down to get equipment out there. There may be occasions where we have to maybe close a lane. If they're working close to the road to tie this in, it won't be uncommon that they'll have to grab that lane so they can get equipment in there. Typically, though, the restrictions is that we will not allow a lane closure or sometimes even a sidewalk or a shoulder closure during peak hours. So, that's typically 7 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 6 in the afternoon. We will not allow that. So it's got to be done during the bulk of the daytime. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll determine that the traffic nature of this road may alter that a little bit too. If there's a heavy peak around midday, we may restrict that too. Contractors love to work at night because they can do whatever they want and just go. Typically, we don't allow that, but if they do have to grab lanes and it will not have an impact to the surrounding community to work at night, that's always an option too. Very low volumes, but they have a lot of light and a lot of noise. So we have to figure out what's going to work best, but we're always looking to minimize traffic impacts during construction, and that is a major component of our plans, is that traffic maintenance during construction. That's a good question.
Any other questions? I'm going to take just a second in case you're thinking about a question, and I just want to thank Peter Barber for the towns and his attention to both our need to traverse Mercy Care Lane and the fact that it's now going to become or has become, at least in part, a public road, and the sidewalks project. I think we've all seen the people walking along Western Avenue, particularly in the winter, on a buildup of ice and snow and mud, sometimes with toddlers and strollers, and very much worried about those people. So both of these projects should help the people who use the library, and for that, I'm very grateful. Any other questions? Yes?
Did I miss, or do we know when that road is open?
The paving of the road should occur either on Wednesday or Friday of this week. My understanding is it takes a day for the road to cure and has to be substantially dry weather. Not perfectly dry, but somewhat dry weather. It looks good this week, in other words. Greg Ware, the highway superintendent, I think would be willing to bet you that by the weekend the road will be open.
That would be great. Any final questions for these gentlemen? Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight, and good job. Thank you, guys.